Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and today we've got a really fun training where we're going to be automating field names. So you can set templates and you can set formats if you like and guide the user. It's going to be a great training, so let's get started. Alright, and the purpose of today's training on automated field names, often when we have records, there's a few reasons, we may not have some space to direct the user of what to enter in a certain field. Or we may want them to enter something in perhaps a specific format, and so we can use these automated field names to do that. And when they enter data, the field name can be canceled out like this. And so it can automate that, and there's a great way we can do that, and we're going to walk you through it. And the idea basically is that we want to show the user the ability to enter specific information in specific fields. In this case, we have a lot of space, but there may be cases where you don't have the space to add field names, or you don't want to use the space for field names, so we can put those field names directly in the box. And when the user selects a box, the directions are cleared out, and when they exit it, if there's no data information, the field name comes back. However, if they enter information, then it's not. And so that's a great way to do it. And so let's go ahead and walk you through that on how that is done. Okay, you'll remember in previous training we have some features that give us the ability to select a row and have that information appear here. We're not going to go through that because that's covered in automated load and save training, so you can look back for that video there, as well as highlighting the selected row. We've gone through that a few times as well. And today's lesson is going to focus on automating these field names when either under two conditions: when there is no specific value, we can enter exactly what we want the user to enter, and we can format that accordingly. And when they enter information, it's then automated and saved. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we did that. Okay, the first we use is, let's go ahead and click Add New Contact, and what that does is it puts a set information into each field, and we did that quite easily here. And basically what I have is 6 fields. Each of those fields have a default or set name, whether it's enter customer, enter city, enter address, email, start date, and phone. Okay, so we have those 6, and the way we did that is we simply took the data from those fields and we put that in over on the right side. As you can see, that information is set up right here. Okay, and this just tells us what column we're on. That's going to help us. This is column 16. Okay, so we're going to use that. So all basically we're doing is when we click Add New, we're going to take this information here and paste it into this information here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code and see how that is done. From your Developers tab, click Visual Basic. You can use Alt F11, or of course you can go into the options. If you do not have the Developers tab, click the Customize ribbon and make sure your developer option is selected here. Okay, here we go. And into the Developers tab, we have created a few different macros. We have 3 different macros. One, and the new one is Add New Contact. But let's go over the other 2 just so you know. Code reset is something you saw before, and these 2 macros simply tells us to stop the calculations and stop events and then restart them. Okay, and the reason we use those is to speed up our code. Okay, macro number 2 is the form load, and we've covered that before. And basically all we are doing in this is when a user selects a specific row, then the information loads above. Okay, and we have gone over that under the load, so we're going to leave that as. I didn't change anything there, so feel free to pull up the older video, which I'd done previously a few weeks, which is the automated tab load and save video, in which you can find details on how that is done. The new macro is the Add New Contract, and this is an extremely simple, just 2 lines of code here. And so what we've done is with sheet 1, since we're only focused on sheet 1, with these 2 lines, we are going to get the information. And the first line, B1, okay, equals E999 end up. So what we're doing here is, and I'm going to put a little comment here, get first available row. What I want with this code is I want to know, when we're adding a new contact, I want to know what is the first available row. Okay, in this case it's 22, and I want to take that row and I want to put it right here. B1 equals, okay, the first available row. So we're going to set that row, because when we add information here, we need to know what row to put that in. When we add perhaps Jack, right, we need to know what row to put that here. We need to know what row, okay? So when we know row 22, we're good to go, okay? So that's the reason that we go ahead and put the row in here, okay? So that's all that does. And then the next line of code simply copies the information. Those are those default field names, P3 to R9, and it copies them. It's using copy and paste, but we're not. It's basically saying the direct values. Since we're only concerned about the values, I don't want to copy formats. I don't want to copy anything else. All I want to copy is values. So we're going to straight range value to straight range. And since these are the same number of cells, it's important when we do a value to value, it's exactly the same number of cells. So we can just do straight, because I want to keep all this formatting the same, right? All I want to do is take these values and put them over here. That's all I want to do, and that line of code helps us achieve that. Okay, so then I've taken this button that I've created and I've assigned a macro to it. Right click, and I've used add contact. I've assigned that macro right here. Okay, and then that allows us to do it. So when we click it, those two things are happening: the last line of code and the information. Okay, so that's how we set the defaults. But now, how do we do one thing? How is it that when we type in Harry, look, Harry is black, Harry the name, the font is black, and yet when we clear it out, how does that font change from gray and italicized? Well, we use conditional formatting, okay? And now there's a few ways we can do that, but the simplest way to do that is to find something common through all of these fields and set one rule that would not be common if you enter data. So take a look closely, and let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit here, and you can see that each one of these fields contains a colon. You see, each one contains a colon. So I'm going to use that as our rule to set the conditional formatting. So let's go ahead and take a look at that into conditional formatting, and we're going to manage the rules here. And I've only created one rule, and here it is. If specific text contains a colon, then in that case I want you to set a font color, okay, and I want to make it italic. That's it. It's extremely simple, okay? So that is how we set the conditional formatting, so that if it contains a colon, then go ahead and make it gray and italicized. Okay, the next feature that I wanted was that when a user enters a cell, okay, I want to clear it out. I don't want them to have to delete this default text automatically. I want it cleared out, okay? And so that's what I want. So let's go ahead and, so what I want to say is, hey, if the user enters a cell, that cell contains a default field name, then clear it out. So let's go ahead and see how we've done that through the code. Into the VBA, and this is going to be a code that's actually on the worksheet itself, so let's go ahead and click customers. And the code functions when we select. Okay, so in that case it's selection change. The code that we're working with is going to be under selection change. Okay, that's here, selection change. And the first code I wrote is this helps us from keeping bugs, you may remember. Basically saying if a user selects more than one cell at a time. If target count is greater than 1, then exit sub, okay? We don't want anything to happen if the user highlights more than one cell. That avoids lots of bugs, and I've included that both here under selection change and under actual change. So this helps us remove bugs, and it's something you can consider using in your code too, except be careful when you're using merge cells. Merge cells contain more than one cell, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we've done it and how this code is going to work. All right, and so basically what I've said here is if, and let's go ahead and isolate this code here, okay? And then we're going to be focused on this code right here. Okay, if the intersect is any one of these fields, F3, F6, F9, H3, okay, those are the same exact fields as these 6 right here, okay? So if a user selects any one of those, then maybe we want to clear the contents, right? But we don't, if we type in Fred here, right? Fred here, when we click it, we don't want to clear the contents, right? Because that's an actual field name. We only want to clear it if it's a default field name, if it's a, information only field name. So we want that cleared out only. And how can we test if it is? Well, we're going to use the same rule. Remember, our field names can all contain colons. Remember, they all contain colons. So we can use that as well as a test. And we can use the inString function, which is this right here, inString, okay? And basically what we're saying here is that if in the string of the target value, which is the cell value, if it contains this colon, right? So if what this will do is it'll count how many colons there are, okay? If there's no colons, it's going to be 0. If there's one colon, it'll be 1. So it'll count the number of colons, okay? So basically what we're saying here is if when you count the number of colons, if it doesn't equal 0, pretty much it's going to equal 1. That means if there's a colon, then clear the contents, okay? So, because generally your fields aren't going to have colons. But if we were to add a colon onto here, right, and then we click it, it's going to disappear because we're using that colon as the differential. Okay, so generally your field names won't have colons probably, so I've chosen that as a relatively uncommon character to be added in normal field data. Okay, and so basically what we're saying here is that if it's 0, if it's not 0, then clear the contents. Okay, so that's great. All right, so that's how that works. All right, and next up I would like to show you, but also the next is if the user exits, right? If it's exit and it's blank, right? If it's blank, fine, I want them to enter. But if they exit and they have left it blank, I want to return that field name back inside. All right, and to do that, what I need to do is basically what I want to say is if a user has left a cell, if they've left, right, here they're entered, but if they're leaving a cell and then the cell they just left, okay, if that cell is one of these 6 cells, right, and it's blank, then please go ahead and enter that default. So we're running a few tests. 1, what is the cell that they just left? 2, is the cell one of these 6 cells that shouldn't be blank? 3, if it is blank, put in the default field name. Okay, and let's go ahead and show you how we did that. The first thing I need to do is I need to know what is the cell that they just left. Okay, and here the last cell, we've put it in B2. B2 is the last cell. Okay, so every time we click one of those cells, it's going to record what cell we're on. And this is important because when we leave the cell, we need to know what cell to test, right? We can't test the target cell because there's no change. We can't test the active cell because the active cell is different, right? Because they could click many cells. We need to know it was H6. We need to know what the last cell was if it was one of these 6. So that's very, very important. Okay, and I'll show you how we do that within the code. Okay, also in selection change, right, we're saying here, if B2 is not empty, okay, that means that if B2, oh, so one more thing, let me go ahead. So after we clear the contents here, we set the target address. We know if they've selected one of these 6 cells, and then if we automatically want to set B2 as the target address. Remember, address is the actual cell name. That tells us every time we select something, the target address changes. Here, B2, this is the target address, H3, okay, target address. So we record it here, okay? So we know that. So now, if they select, notice there's no target range here. That means any selection in the worksheet, we're going to test some things out, okay? If B2 does not equal empty, okay, we need to make sure there is a value there. If it's not empty, okay, then what do we need to do? Well, we need to make a test. What I need to know is H3 empty? Okay, I need to know, is H3 empty? If it's empty, right, when we select something else, then put something in there, okay? So first we need to test if H3 is empty. So that's how we're going to run our code there. So let's go ahead and check that out. We're saying here, if B2 value, B2, we know this is H3, right? H3, if range H3 value is empty, okay? H3, not the B2 value, but B2, remember B2 is H3. So if H3 value equals empty, then, okay, then what? Then range of H3, remember, then H3 value equals what? What does it equal? Well, what I want it to equal is I want it to equal this right here, okay? I want it to equal this, okay? So how do we find that? Okay, well, this is column 6, okay? This is column 6, excuse me, 8, okay? This is 6, okay? So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, if this is column 8 and this is column 18, right? This is column 18. This is column 18, so they're basically 10 away. So we need to say, okay, 10 columns away, the same row, but 10 columns away, take whatever is in the field 10 columns away and paste it into this, okay? If this is column 8, this is column 18, take whatever's in column 18 and paste it here, same row. I've kept the rows the same, see? We're going to highlight row 3. You see everything's on the same row. So we're not worried about the row. We're going to use the same row. So how do we do that? I'll go ahead and show you with the code now. And here's how we do that. Let's go ahead and move this over a little bit so you can see the code. And basically we say that if the value is empty, then H3 equals what? Equals, and we're using cells. We use cells and not range when both the row and the column are going to be numbers. Okay, we use range when we know the column letter. Okay, but when we're going to use both variables, we're going to use the column and the row as numbers, then we use cells. Okay, that's an important lesson to learn throughout VBA. When you have columns and rows as numbers, use cells. When you know the column as a letter, you can use range. Okay, so cells, and in cells, when you're running cells, the column is always first. Okay, this is our column. Excuse me, this is our row. Row is first, column is second. Okay, and this here, this is our column, this is our row. Okay, so basically what I'm going to say is, and remember, this is H3, okay? H3, this is H3. So we're saying, what is the row of H3? Okay, what is the row of H3? Well, we know it's 3, okay? So remember, B2 is 3, right? So we're saying, okay, the row of H3 is 3, okay? So that's good. So we got the row is 3, we know the row. But now what is the column? So now we need to say, okay, remember B2 is H3. Okay, so the column here of H3 is 8, right? 8. But we don't want 8, we want to add 10 to it. So we're going to say the column of H3 is 8 plus 10 is 18. Okay, so we have 3 and 18. Okay, let's go over that. So what we're saying is this value right here is column 18, row 3. So if you want this value here in the code, it's cells 8, okay, 3, 18, okay? That's how that works. Cells 3, 18. In VBA, that will give you this right here, okay? So that's what we want. We want 3 and 18, okay? And so basically, if we know that this is 3, right, row 3, and we know this is column 8, we just simply add 10 and we get to this. That's how we know what field to copy over. And that's why we can do it for each one, because they're all the same. Okay, so that's all we do, and we're saying, okay, basically, if it's empty, if H3 is empty, copy over whatever we have set over there. So that is how we do it, and it's very, very simple. In a way, it's complex to get it right, but it's only done with one line of code. And there's a few small things to get it right. You have to make sure that the code is in the right order, but I've done that for you now, so I've done all the hard work for you. All right, and so basically in the worksheet change here, okay, and in this here, what we have, and this is also only used for when we change. We covered this when we make a change here. Remember, this in the code, this is worksheet change. That means when we actually change a value, what we're doing is we are putting the details down here, okay? So when we change this to Los Angeles, it changes down here. Let's spell that right. It changes down there. So that's what that code is. But we did cover that in the auto save and load feature, okay? So that is how we do automated field names, and it's a really, really great tool that really helps users out to know what they should put in specific fields, and it's super easy to program with just a few lines of code. I hope you have appreciated this tutorial and training. Please, as always, share this with your friends or your groups. I would very much appreciate it, and thank you for joining me today.